Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the DSSC Insight series. It's good to have you back after the summer break. I believe it has been since June that we had last webinar. Now we're back to our normal schedule, monthly appointment. So for today, we are very excited to talk about one key aspect that covers much of the work happening within the Data Spaces Support Center, which is standardization in data spaces. We will do so with the following agenda. So we will have an introduction by Gianfranco Cicconi, the Executive Director of the Data Spaces Support Center. Then Clara Pizzuela, Vice President for Founder Program at Fiber Foundation, and Saba Rogotis, Data Ecosystem and Senior Project Manager for BDBA. They will talk about the DSSC and standardization, especially also going a bit deeper into the liaison with international standardization bodies. Following that, Anil Turkmayali, Senior Project Manager for the International Data Spaces Association, will talk about the Data Spaces Protocol. And we will wrap this webinar with a Q&A. Just a reminder, you can ask questions throughout the webinar in the chat. We will do our best to address all the questions that are asked throughout the webinar. Any unanswered question will be dealt with in the dedicated Q&A at the end. So just a few housekeeping items. So this webinar is recorded, and the recording is available on our YouTube channel. And you can access our YouTube channel by scanning the QR code on this slide. So we, on the YouTube channel, we will not find only not this webinar, but also all the other webinars. And we managed to also provide dedicated educational video on data spaces, and also we will have recording from our past event. So you will have the chance to see all the recording of the major event that we did since the project started. Another important item, which is if you want to stay up to date with everything that the DSSC does, you just have to subscribe in the newsletter, scan the QR code on the slide. You will be up to speed with everything that we do, from the technical deliverables to partner event to our own yearly event. So just subscribe to just keep up to speed with everything that we do. Now, I'm done talking, and I'm really, really happy to give the floor to Gianfranco for the opening. Now, I believe Gianfranco doesn't have any slides. So I'll stop sharing now. And Gianfranco, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Anna. I just think, after all, to welcome the audience to today's webinar. Again, if you did not have the opportunity to see me before hosting, my name is Gianfranco. I serve as Executive Director to the project. In my spare time, I'm also the Chief Solution Officer at the International Data Spaces Association. I'm calling today actually from the JRC, the beautiful European Commission's Joint Research Center offices in Ispra on the Lago Maggiore in Italy, where the DSSC will host a role-play exercise trying to design a data space with a group of researchers here playing different stakeholders. Super exciting. So one more reasons to stay close to us. We probably will publish a paper out of this sometime soon, so just stay tuned. But the topic for today's webinar is standardization. Most of us probably have a good enough idea of what standardization means. The fact that you can take a flight to almost anywhere in the world, turn back on your mobile phone and connect to whatever mobile network is available there is only possible because of all the businesses and governments involved in providing, regulating mobile phone services, and they have agreed on the standards by which those mobile services work. So it took a few decades to get to that level of maturity, but we made it, right? So, well, guess what? The technology and best practices we need for data sharing in data spaces, of course, will benefit from standardization too. For example, when implementing the means of interoperability in a data space, standardization ensures that not only can we all share data using about the same technology arrangements, but that we can agree to use the exact same arrangements and have specifications and tools to ensure that it will work first time, or almost first time. Standards also reduce the risk for companies and organizations in general when they need to invest resources in implementing technology or upskilling their staff. The evolution of standards is closely controlled and rooted in the consensus of the organizations that contribute. So be aware, though, I mean, all good so far, but we're talking here about international standards. An international standard is not just a standard that works anywhere in the world, as the word perhaps suggests. It's not a matter of where you are. An international standard is a standard that is recognized by and governed by an international standard organization like the ISO, one of the better known. Commercial success alone is not sufficient to make a standard. Later in this webinar, my colleague Anil Turkmayali will describe the work the International Data Spaces Association, a member of the DSSC, has done over many years to specify the data space protocol and to bring that specification to a point of maturity that will elevate it to an international standard by ISO, IUC in the next few months. It's not an easy journey, and Anil will tell us about it. And the International Data Spaces Association is a non-for-profit, so it's not something you can do every day. It needs resources and commitment. They don't make any money out of this process, but the association members have sustained the work with funding and volunteering until to the point we got today. And it is actually the members of the association that created the work. So all of this is needed, and all of the organizations working today in developing technology require your commitment to some degree. Following Anil, before Anil, Clara Pezuela of the Fiverr Foundation and Savas Rogotis of Big Data Value Association, also a member of the DSSC, will describe how the Data Space Support Center is also directly active in the standardization circles, bringing the experience of the common European data spaces, many of which I hope are in the room today, and the rest of our network and of the other DSSC members themselves to the venues where the new standards are discussed, whether it is CEN, ISO, the World Wide Web Consortium, and so on. I believe I will have the time at the end to take your questions as well, or at least to help find what you need about the DSSC or the topic of today together with the others. For now, just join me in welcoming Clara and Savas. So Anna, if you can put back on screen the slides, they can go on next. See you later.
Yes, thank you very much, Gianfranco. I believe Clara, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna, Gianfranco. Yes, indeed, the work that my colleague Savas and me will be doing today is to introduce you in the view of the support center on standardization and the different standardization activities that we are carrying out in the project in order to cope with this topic. So first of all, let me introduce, just elaborating a bit on top of Gianfranco's message, why standardization is relevant for data spaces. So first of all, because the data spaces need to be compliant with the European regulation, and the various directives and acts that the European Union is providing to the European citizens and companies needs to be implemented. And one way of implementing these acts is creating standards, requesting standards that will favor the implementation and adoption of this regulation. Also, because in data spaces, the data sharing needs to be compliant with the FAIR principles, which means data being shared in fairness, accessible, interoperable, and reusable manner. And this requires, in all the cases, create or adopt certain standards in order to fulfill these principles. The second reason why standardization is relevant for data spaces is for achieving interoperability. Interoperability at different levels. The first at the level of the data, because we need common vocabularies in order to understand each other. We need common APIs in order to exchange data in an homogeneous way. We need to cope with different data formats, and we need to agree on certain common metadata in order to describe the data in the same way. A second level of interoperability, where we need standards, is for data spaces interoperability as such, because we need standards to define a common way of government data, a common way to publish and discover data in a catalog, agreements for sharing this data in a controlled and trusty way. And finally, we need also interoperability if we want to share data across different data spaces. Then we are talking here about the standards for federating data across different data spaces from different domains that perhaps are not defining the data in the same way. We need also to agree on a common way to describe identities in order to allow people from participants from one data space to access data from other data space. So all these different layers of interoperability requires standards in order to being able to deploy a data space. And finally, the third reason why standardization is relevant for data spaces is because of the need of alignment with international standards. First, because we need to reach this regulatory convergence if we want, because we are really living in a global world, and everything is moving around the world with no borders, with no frontiers, especially in the digital world. So we need this regulatory convergence, and the standards are a way for implementing this regulatory convergence. Also, because we need to promote the European standards towards international standards, in this way for favoring the European companies to get access to the global market. So for all these reasons, standards and standardization activities are relevant in the scope of data spaces. But what is the challenge? The challenge is, well, to get the balance between the request or the mandates that are coming from the regulation, the existing standardization bodies that are also creating their standards, and the different standardization requests that are being launched by the European Commission, with the already adopted and used standards in the business, in the society, in the let's say real world. So it's a kind of balance between the top-down from the regulation and the bottom-up from the existing standards and use cases. Because we have different standards depending on the domain, but we also have the need of having cross-domain standards to interact each other across the domains. And we already have some use cases of data spaces that are already using certain standards, and that they are relying on existing technologies and implementations that are already using some standards, in some cases, de facto standards. So getting the balance between these two, let's say, directions or perspectives is the challenge that we are trying to cope in the support center. So what is the role of the support center in all this process? So of course, as we are trying to support the standardization organizations and also the European Commission in the implementation of the various laws that are coming from the Parliament, we are able to provide inputs and feedback both to the European Commission through the European Data Innovation Board that is proposing certain standardization requests to implement the different acts, but also to the different standardization organizations that are already focused on creating standards in the scope of data spaces through the participation in different working groups, committees, focus groups, and so on. We are also collaborating with other initiatives that are also doing activities on standardization, like the high-level forum or the multi-stakeholder ICT platform, and providing inputs to the various reports and rolling plan for the ICT standardization, for example. So with all this in mind, let me recap which are the main activities that the support center has been launched so far in the scope of standardization. We started by collecting all the standards that are being used in the scope of the data spaces. looking at the different data spaces initiatives in different domains, but also looking at the different technologies that are out there. So we created this collection of standards that is a good food for the expert groups that are working in the blueprint provided by the support center. And through this collection, they can identify which are the most existing or adopted standards so far in the different domains, and can they, on this basis, recommend also which are the most useful standards cross-domain. Then, as I said before, we have been also collaborating with other initiatives in aligning these standardization activities with other initiatives. And finally, recently, we have also created this plan for liaising with existing standardization development organizations. And we have created a role within the project that will be detailed in more detail by my colleague Savas in a while. So with all these activities in mind, which standards should the support center recommend, and which standardization organization should the support center be liaised? In regards to the standards, we have defined ourselves a kind of criteria. So first of all, we are more focused on the cross-domain standards because we think that the different data spaces will use on top of these cross-domain standards the specific standards for every domain. Of course, we are looking at those standards that are compliant with each other. It doesn't make sense to recommend one standard that is incompatible with other recommended standards that are widely adopted by the existing data spaces and data spaces community, and relying on well-known basic standards. With this in mind, the current blueprint is recommended 3 main standards, one for the centralized identity, the verifiable credentials, one for description of the data for publication and discovery, the data catalog vocabulary, and the third one for policy access, ODRL, Open Digital Rights Language. Of course, the idea is that more standards could be recommended in future versions of the blueprint, but for now, we think that these 3 ones are a good consensus across all the domains. In relation to the standardization organizations, we are putting the focus on those committees or working groups or workshops that are focused on data spaces itself, because some of them are quite generic, and we are more focused on those data spaces specific. That are affordable in the time that we have for contributing, for provide effective feedback to these organizations, where the participation of a project like the support center is feasible in terms of rules of the committee or of the workshop, and those ones that are maximizing the impact of the outcomes of the support center, mainly outcomes of the blueprint. In this regards, we have identified so far 4 standardization organizations that are very much in our scope, and where we are already establishing this liaison. One is the focus group at CENELEC on the cloud edge and data spaces, the workshop about trusted data transaction also in CENELEC, and the DCAT working group at the W3C. We have also one of our partners contributing to the working group 5 of the Committee 38 of ISO about data spaces, concepts, and characteristics. And others are already under evaluation, and we plan to keep an eye on all these upcoming working groups and committees where the support center may play a role. And then now I think I can give the floor to my colleague Savas to explain a little bit better what does it mean to this liaison with standardization organizations. So Savas, please.
Yes. Thank you very much, Clara. Well, I would like to start my short presentation here with expressing that there was some point in time, it was around June, that we wanted to a little bit to reflect on the strategy on how DSSC is engaged with standard development organizations. So I would start with the first period of the project up to June 2024, that DSSC pretty much engaged with standard development organizations through specific working groups or technical committees, through encouraging its consortium partners, but also community members to be engaged and closely connected with these specific working groups and technical committees. But following this, we believe that it would be much more efficient if DSSC established these liaisons as a project. So we identified that this would make our engagement more efficient in the sense that it will enhance the project visibility all in all, but also its capacity to influence data space and bringing a strong common voice. So this, as I expressed in the beginning, has been a very important point in the lifetime of the project, that we identified that we need to adapt our strategy in engaging the SDOs. Now, Clara, if you can move on to my next slide. I would like here to present with this slide. I know that it might seem a little complex, but I would like to emphasize here on the role of this SDO liaison person. This is a very important role within the project because it implies that there are some commitments, some important obligations by the person that is responsible within the DSSC to be the face of the DSSC in the eyes of the different standard development organizations. So within the project, we identify different people that for us it would be important to carry on this hat and represent DSSC in the different technical committees or working groups. So I would like to emphasize that this is a somehow bidirectional information flow that this individual, this liaison person under this role has to carry and has to fulfill. From one hand side, and you might find here with the gray arrow, this individual, of course, needs to follow up the activities with regards to the standard development organization on behalf of DSSC and only on behalf of DSSC. Of course, to be very much updated on what takes place in the activities of its distinct standard development organization. Apart from that, to offer visibility on the different DSSC objectives, activities, but also deliveries, and this is something very, very important. And also to be able to provide feedback based on DSSC results, on what is available from the support center, to ensure alignment, and alignment, of course, with external work, but also internally within the project. So this is from one hand side an obligation, a very important obligation that needs to be carried out, to be addressed by the person in the DSSC consortium that carries this hat and wears this hat as a liaison person of DSSC. Apart from that, and this is now the second dimension, the second arrow, the green-blue arrow, this individual needs, of course, getting back now to the Data Space Support Center to offer regular updates with regards to standard development organization activities to the consortium members, to inform the consortium member on what is taking place in the different standard development organizations. But apart from that, also to raise issues, to escalate issues that might affect also DSSC decisions with regards to standards. So as I expressed again, this is more that this liaison person has a dual role, if I can say, in from one hand side, bridging the gap between the DSSC and the standard development organization and reporting back with what needs to be reported to the consortium members in order to ensure alignment at all stages. And Clara, if you could move on. Here, I would like to put some more emphasis on what Clara has presented before. 3 standard development organizations and relevant working groups that for us, for DSSC, has been considered of high priority. You can find in this slide deck, specifically how these different groups are having relevance for data spaces from one hand side, but also the expected DSSC contribution to that. So if I could go a little bit more in depth, Clara discussed about the W3C and the dataset exchange working group that is responsible for DCAT. And here you can find, with regards to the relevance for data spaces, aspects that are already publicly available in the working group website. So it's important for us, and we identified that this is very much relevant for data spaces, the fact that this working group is maintaining and revising DCAT, taking into account feature requests from the DCAT user community. Also, the fact that this working group defines and publishes guidance on the specifications and use of application profiles when requesting and serving data on the web. With regards now to DSSC, we would really like to be involved in these activities in order to push on the extensions of DCAT when needed, and specifically for aspects of our work, for example, the service description. We know that DCAT is proposed in some parts of DSSC blueprint, for example, the data services offerings descriptions, building block. So it's very important for us to be very closely connected with this work item and identify gaps within our community that we could provide as feedback with regard to future DCAT extensions. So this is one working group that we identified as important and the DSSC pursues its further somehow engagement with through the role of this liaison person. A second group is about the CENELEC Trusted Data Transaction Workshop. And here, with regards to data spaces, the relevance is also obvious. Through this workshop, the idea is to reinforce trust between all parties involved in data transactions, but also to provide a better understanding of the concept and implication of trusted data transaction and anticipate future related standardization requirements. From DSSC viewpoint now, of course, this is very much relevant. This is a group of very much strategic importance for us in order to ensure alignment in a framework for trusted data transactions. And following that, also to reach a common perspective and common understanding on aspects that have to do with the glossary, the terminology that we are using, on data products, but also in different use cases. And here it's more important if we can mention stages from passing from the data user to the data provider, all these different stages that we need to build a common understanding of the implication and what has to do with the trusted data transactions. Finally, I would like also to mention the CENELEC focus group on data spaces, cloud, and edge. And here, this group is very relevant for us, for the data spaces community, because it helps identify the standardization gaps in the data spaces, cloud and edge standards, but also act as a platform somehow to connect various stakeholders that are working on this topic. From the DSSC perspective, we decided and we somehow prioritized the connection, the engagement with this group through the role again of this liaison person, because it helps us provide feedback on proposed standardization requests and plans, but also it helps DSSC to engage with a wider range of stakeholders on this topic. So for these reasons, and somehow to summarize with regards to this slide, we prioritize these three SDOs for DSSC. We assigned liaison persons in order to facilitate the engagement with them. Operationalizing this engagement is not a one-fits-all solution. So there are different implications, different somehow challenges. But in any case, for us, it's very important to identify that within this work, DSSC brings a common strong voice. And of course, it's better for us to be aligned and reach a common understanding with the data space community. And now with this, I would like to give the floor back to Clara, because I know Clara has one last slide to present.
Yes, Abbas. So just basically for concluding, to recap on the relevance of this liaison role within the project that we have created in order to allow us to continuously participating and reporting on the different standardization organizations that are relevant in the scope of data spaces. That we are, as I said, evaluating other possible standardization organizations that are relevant to be liaised. And for example, we are looking at the just recently created Technical Committee 25 on CENELEC about the data spaces, data, cloud, and edge. And we will maintain continuously this collection of standards, especially relevant for our experts in the support center feeding the blueprint, and also looking at the different domains, what is going on in regards to standards, and periodically reporting on these standardization activities to the European Data Innovation Board in case we may help in the identifying these standardization requests that are needed for implementing the different laws. And finally, promote the standardization activities within the data spaces community, not only from the DSSC partners, but also from all the data spaces and from all the stakeholders that are belonging to the community that can contribute to this standardization effort. So it's everything from our side. So Ana, Gianfranco, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Clara. Thank you very much, Savas. There's a lot of questions in the chat. There's a big discussion going, and we will, if you want to try to already provide an answer, you can. But we will definitely pick up the most interesting question from what's written in the chat. But I don't want to steal any more time to our colleague Anil, who now will introduce the data spaces protocol. Anil, the floor is yours. I see you're sharing. Perfect.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Savas. Thank you, Clara, for the presentation. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So I would like to talk about the importance of the standardization in the data sharing through the data space protocol project, which is now in a stable form and which is being adopted by many that would need it. But first, if you have been interested in the IDF standard, or I'm pretty sure that you have been exposed to this infographic at least one time, so which is depicting the different components and roles happening, existing in a data space. But today, I will not be talking about it in deep detail, but mostly I would like to focus on this part because this is where the data exchange happens between parties through IDS connectors. So why the standardization of the data sharing is important? Because these connectors should be speaking the same language, basically so that the data can be exchanged in a secure and sovereign manner. Basically, a data space is where the multi-party data exchange is happening in a secure, sovereign, and trustworthy fashion, and through connectors. So connectors are open standards, of course, and everybody is free to contribute and customize according to their needs. So data space protocol is ensuring that. But of course, this infographic is showing a perfect world picture, and we have some problems in the real world, so which could be categorized as having unclear terms or conflicting formats, or the message types are not compatible, or which results in limited interoperability. And if you take a look at the structure of the data spaces, so it's pretty much like the first years of before the internet, there's a big fragmentation, and that's also because of the lack of the standards in the data sharing. So here, I would like to highlight what are the main requirements of all these data spaces, which are the data sovereignty in one hand, the interoperability, scalability, and trustworthiness. And so data space protocol is contributing to these needs, basically. So data sovereignty is maintained by basically allowing the data providers to set and enforce their usage policies. So the protocol defines how rules are negotiated, such as who can access data, or for how long, under which conditions, so that this ensures that data sovereignty is respected. And regarding interoperability, so we always stick to the European interoperability frameworks, 4 layers, but it's basically achieved through standardized data exchange formats and protocols. And it's a complex and challenging topic, we know that, but data space protocol is providing a baseline for the technical and semantic interoperability, and all parties are always free to implement their own customizations and specifications on the spaces. And on the other hand, growth and scalability is important because this is the way to automate and manage high-scaled data operations. And this is also quite defined in the data space protocols, flexible and modular architecture, where there is a clear distinction of the data plane and the control plane. And trustworthiness, of course, has also been mentioned in many presentations before, and it's ensured by the fact that parties should trust each other. And it's not only about security, but there are also many dynamics that are adding to that. So it's basically about knowing who you are and who you are dealing with while sharing data. So there are some authentication, authorization, and access control mechanisms which are within the protocol. But of course, we always say that you can always feel free to use a trust framework such as the one from GaiaX. So, so this is actually what I recently meant about this separation of the control plane and data plane. And so, as you probably know, in any data space, the control plane is where the governance of the data is made about how the data is shared. And so this is the plane where the what governs how data is shared and who gets access to it and under which rules it should be consumed. So basically, the data space protocol solves this by providing a standardized framework that manages everything from setting data sharing policies to ensuring secure and compliant data transfers. So it's basically simplifying the complexity of the data sharing between parties, because we always know that the source of the problem is that people want to share something, but they don't know how to behave in which stage of the data sharing process. So I've mentioned it in my previous slides as well. So maybe to position its importance and its role in the data sharing. So it's quite similar to what HTTP did for computers to communicate over the web, or Swift for contributing to the financial messaging across borders, or Bluetooth that made it available for devices to connect to each other and in a wireless way, and GSM for mobile communication. So it's basically a standardized way to show, to dictate how parties involved in a data sharing should behave. So as I said, so we are also following this 4-layered approach of legal, organizational, semantic, and technical. And sorry. And here, data space protocol is providing the baseline for the technical and semantic interoperability, so that one can stick on it and use the protocol and then build on top of it based on their custom needs. So it's consisting, in terms of structure, it's consisting of 3 layers, which are catalog protocol, contract negotiation, and transfer process protocol. And this is pretty much like trading in the real life. Like first, the data provider is preparing and offering what's available in the catalogs, and then parties negotiate and agree on how the data will be used. And then comes the execution of the data transfer according to the agreed terms, such as you go to a library and ask for a book, and then the library decides whether the book is, whether you are able to lend the book for a while, and then how long and where you can read it, whether you are allowed to share it with another party, and then they give it to you directly in exchange of a contract or something. So it's just like real life, but there is a framework that puts parties into some kind of standard. So basically, it's standardizing the formats for data exchange. So this one depicts an example of data sharing between a public transportation authority and some app developers who would like to build something on it. So first, they agree on the catalog protocol about standardizing the format by using DCAT and also using ODRL for policies. And then they negotiate on the data usage terms and conditions, and then the transfer process happens. there are some more examples which are more into details, but at least this slide is here to show that it's really super important to use the same language and same terminology when data sharing is happening between providers and consumers of data. So this is why actually this is the way, the framework where initiatives or organizations interested in data sharing can stick on and can rely on and can use it further. So it's it didn't come out of blue, of course. So it has been in deep discussions for many years in the IDSA network, and it's not written down in our head office in an ivory tower. So it came out as the natural need of the industry. So there are a lot of organizations who are involved in the co-definition of it, and also many that are experimenting with it, so that we can we need to see the data space protocol being implemented in these initiatives and also in research projects, so that we can understand what is missing, what is needed, so that we can work backwards to improve the protocol itself. And there are also some R&D projects who are adopting it, which are, as I said, very important. And I can even say that in the old days of the IDSA, there were even different names for the project, such as communication guides or something like that. And so now it's the data space protocol, and it's openly available and ready to be used in a stable format. And you can always become a co-creator of the data space protocol. So I'm happy to share the links in the chat, and you can also find them through IDSA's website. And the one thing that is being developed is the technology compatibility kit, the TCK, that is being developed with the sole aim that people or organizations can basically prove their compliance with the data space protocol. So it's expected to be ready towards the end of the year, and it's also being a project developed under Eclipse Foundation. So we have, as I said, I will be happy to share the links which are more accessible, I think, in that case. So there is this Eclipse data spaces working group under Eclipse Foundation, where we are also a member of, and there's a specification project of this Eclipse data space protocol, which is titled Eclipse Data Space Protocol, and you are also welcome to check the current developments there. And of course, in terms of standardization, which is today's topic, we are looking forward to have a public pass submission, so publicly available specification submission by the beginning of next year, which is January 25. And so currently it's under working group SC38, so on its way to become an ISO standard, so that all the initiatives, all the projects that are interested in implementing data spaces or data sharing can use the data space protocol as the framework. So that would be it from my end. So thank you very much. Back to you, Anna.
Thank you, Anil. Now we have, thank you for all the speakers, also to Clara and Savas and Gianfranco again. There has been a lot of movement in the chat, so we're happy to start answering a few questions. I'm just going to pick one from the Q&A, which is for you, Anil, which is, a data space protocol will standardize the formats of different data assets, and how is this going to be implemented?
So it's basically, so as I said, standardizing how the connectors should talk to each other. So not about data sets, not about data standardization, but more for the data space standardization or communication standardization. So the data standardization is one topic and data space standardization is another. So basically it's about how the connectors should speak to each other so that they can secure the data exchange. Gianfranco, please.
Yeah, there's something that I always make as an example to clarify the different levels where these kind of technologies work, right? So imagine that I want to send some information to Anna. I can use an Excel file in email, right? That's not a data space, but nonetheless, I need to agree a format. She needs to have, say, Excel. I need to have Excel my side or a software that can open Excel. We need to agree on what we mean inside that Excel file. Perhaps I live in the UK, so perhaps I use miles and she uses kilometers. All of that is, in a way, not a DSSC problem. And again, don't get angry at me. That's a traditional data interoperability problem before we had to worry too much about how we automate and scale data sharing between many parties. That is what we do in data sharing. So the traditional data interoperability problems, the ones that have been dealt with probably for decades now, are still there. Unfortunately, we haven't solved everything yet. The DSSC at the moment is working specifically on those problems where we need super high scale of data sharing with multiple parties. So occasionally you will find us dealing with those more traditional problems, but it's not, and again, don't shoot on me if you don't agree, it's not necessarily where the DSSC needs to spend the best effort.
Thank you, Gianfranco. Thank you, Anil. So remaining on topic, because I'll keep bothering you, Anil. Sorry about that. There's a topic. There's a question which just came in now about the data space protocol, and the question goes: the data space protocol is quite agnostic on identity, although interoperability of identity is central to mutual initial negotiation. Why don't you piggyback and liaise with the work done by EUDI, the EIDAS expert group, and the large-scale project in order to leverage what is broadly done with verifiable credential? And on electronic attestation of attributes, which are key to trust and contract initiation. This is a big question. So we have, how much time do we have? But I guess Anil wants to start, or... They're not.
Yeah, I can at least start to explain it from the infographic that I've shown, like that shows the IDS compliant data space. So it's about to put the chronological order of how data sharing happens. And here, I mean, the parts like the identity provision or ADAS, or verifiable credentials, they fall more under the identity provider role in IDS. So, but here what we do is like to establish a common language for the connectors. So this falls a little bit outside of the scope of the current version of the data space protocol, but of course nice to be having. But it's currently not in the scope, but it doesn't mean that it will never be in the scope, I would say.
Thank you, Anil. Gianfranco, I thought you had anything to add, but if you... No, you're done. Okay. So I would like to come back with one key question. Most of the other questions have already been answered. And I know that Gianfranco, you spend a lot of time on dealing with this question, but I wanted to pick the brains of Clara, Savas, if they had something to add. And there was a question was asked towards the beginning of the webinar, if we can comment on the role of open standards versus proprietary standards in the ongoing work. Is there a risk that some open standards will be replaced by proprietary standard as a result of the ongoing standardization work of the ESOs? I don't know if you, Clara or Savas, you can tell me if you had anything to add of this question, or otherwise, I'm sure Gianfranco's reply was pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, I think that the reply from Gianfranco is quite clear. So hopefully not. Hopefully we will keep open standards instead of proprietary standards. But it's true that not all the standards are fully open, and well, this is like it is. So.
Okay. Thank you, Clara. A question came in from Tarvon, I think, I think we're jumping back to the data space protocol, and he's asked that perhaps a stacked view like the TCP IP stack would help people understand what's being done where. And is there something like that already available in the slides you provided, Anil?
Yeah, I also was looking for a like icon, if I could. But meanwhile, also was checking with deeper detail of the dataspace protocol. And yeah, it's currently positioned, I can understand that it's currently positioned as an agnostic, but of course, this is positioned as an agnostic and flexible. So in regards to the identity management, which is not really inside dataspace protocol, so it's managed somewhere outside by the identity provider. And so maybe one of the reasons is that it's more focusing on the data share or standardizing the data sharing, and identity management would be positioned as another aspect that may require standardization. So that would be a natural separation of roles, which can always combine or merge or intersect somehow.
Thank you very much, Anil. I feel a bit guilty with bothering you with all these many questions. No, we're here. That's what we're here for. So I think we have answered all the many questions in the chat. Also, thanks to the ongoing work of our speakers that really strive to reply as they came. So as a closeout, maybe there is an additional question. It's Julian who was asking that he would appreciate a separate webinar to explain the ins and outs of the protocol in some more detail. I think Anil and the other IDSA colleagues will take care of that. And I think a lot of dissemination work has already been ongoing on the protocol. So I'm sure this request will be taken in consideration.
Definitely. There are some ongoing events and webinars organized by IDSA on that end.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much, Anil. So once again, thank you for the attendees. Thank you so much for attending this webinar. As I said at the beginning, we're back to our regular scheduling. So next month, we have this DSSC Insight series, which should be potentially around at the blueprint. We could talk about the blueprint of the latest version of the blueprint. So stick around, and you will see the link to register to the webinar very soon. So thanks you, Gianfranco, Savas, Clara, and Anil for attending. And I hope that to see you soon. It's coming, but I don't have the authorization to unveil that yet. So thank you very much, and see you soon in the next webinar. Bye bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.